Welcome to It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and early 80s. This is Kara Siegel. We have Eddie Denkin here on the podcast. Welcome to It's Been How Long? A podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students of the late 70s and early 80s. Welcome, Eddie. How
Thanks
you
for
doing?
having me.
Appreciate you helping me out with this. So here we are, 40 plus years. 40 plus years. What are you doing now? How are you enjoying spending your time?
So I am still working, and life is pretty much the same as it was for the last 40 years, other than the fact that my kids are grown and out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
I have been a dentist since 1988, and I worked my first 6 years in upstate New York in the Albany area and Woodstock area. Then I moved back to Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, and spent the next 25 years in Bucks County outside of Philly.
Wow.
3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, we moved down to North Carolina to escape the cold.
I hear
And
you.
and I'm in a practice about 3 miles from my house and work Monday through Thursdays.
That's great.
So that's my professional life.
Yeah. And how do you enjoy spending your time? That's what you do, but how do you enjoy
Well,
spending your time?
how I enjoy spending my time is going to the beach as often as we can. And we're about a half an hour from the beach. I still play ice hockey, which I've been playing since 1972.
Wow.
And I also referee men's league hockey, which I did last night till about midnight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So hockey, going to the beach, good, and that keeps you busy along with work.
Yep. And traveling. We still love to travel. We were in Italy in February and March. We're heading to Sonoma, California at the end of September. And then next spring, next May, we're heading on a cruise to Portugal and Spain.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, we
Tra-
like to get out and see the world.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
great. So what did you enjoy doing back in high school?
playing hockey.
Hockey. Okay.
High school was a weird experience for most people, and I'm no different. Um, I was a lot quieter back in those days, a lot more shy. So there wasn't a lot of socialization other than just hanging out with some friends until my senior year. And senior year, I had my first serious girlfriend,
Oh.
whom you know from confirmation class. That was Debbie Summers.
Oh.
And Debbie went to West, so there wasn't a lot of interaction with my friends. And most of my friends at East didn't believe she existed. And we went to both proms.
Oh, wow.
And that was when, people came up to me and, wow, oh, she really does exist. And I distinctly remember going to a graduation party where she came to the graduation party with me, and there were a couple girls who saw her that I was friends with and like, oh my God, she does really exist. Made a big deal out of it. But high school was a lot of hockey. Um,
Any other clubs or anything?
well, let's see. We started a boys lacrosse club when I was a senior. So when we were seniors, so I was
So
active
we
in
had
that.
girls lacrosse, but we didn't have boys lacrosse
We had
at
a
the
girls
time.
lacrosse team,
Right.
and we started a boys lacrosse club, but there were no other schools that had boys lacrosse.
Okay.
So we practiced in the afternoons, and we got
Do you have a
challenged.
coach?
We did. Well, we had an advisor. Do you
Who is that?
remember? Do you remember a gym teacher named Miss Swift?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
young, blonde, 20
Yeah.
something year old. That's who we asked to do it.
Oh.
I don't think it was for the lacrosse reasons. I think it was more the cute blonde reasons. And a lot of, all teenage boys. But we did get a challenge from the girls lacrosse
Oh.
kids to play against them. So one Saturday we showed up at East and we scrimmaged with the girls for about 10 minutes, and it was a pretty one-sided affair because the guys in general were faster and bigger and shot harder. So we ended up switching it up and playing lacrosse, co-ed.
Yeah.
And it became a thing that we did every Saturday morning at Johnson Elementary School. Well,
Oh,
not
that's
every,
great.
but we spent a lot of Saturdays playing co-ed lacrosse there, and then stopping at 7-Eleven at the water tower,
Yeah.
and getting something to drink and something to eat afterwards, just sitting in the parking lot and chatting for a while. It was a very high schooly thing when you think back on it, but it was one of the things I really enjoyed about my senior year. Senior year was really the only year of high school I enjoyed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I really liked it.
Did you have a job back in high school?
I did. I
What'd you
worked.
do?
I only went to school half day senior year, and I worked for my dad afterwards. My dad owned a photo lab for
Oh,
commercial photographers in Westville, well, near Deptford Mall, about 10 minutes from
yeah.
Deptford Mall on 130. If you remember where 130 and
Nope. I am
do you
not a
remember
directions person.
do you remember where you
I know where
would
Deptford Mall was.
okay, do you remember where 42 and 295 would come together? That horrible traffic
Oh, what?
if you were trying to get to the
Yes.
Atlantic City Expressway.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
So if you kept on
Got lost there. Yes.
right, well, if you stayed on 295 south past there like you were going to the Delaware Memorial Bridge,
Yeah.
there was a spot where 295 and 130 are almost parallel, and there was a big oil refinery down there.
Okay.
Well, he was about 5 minutes up the road from there. So it was about a half an hour drive from east after school. And I'd eat my lunch in the car and work from, I don't know, 1 to 6 or 1 to 5, whatever it was, every day, and then head home and have dinner.
What did you do? Did you do
Well,
processing?
I did pretty much everything at the job. I started working there full time in the summer when I was 13.
Oh, wow.
So all the kids in my family worked there at some point. I'm trying to think. So I ran a paper processor, which is basically, and I spliced film.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So when a lab processes film, it's usually like in a reel of about 200 rolls of film. For your younger listeners, film is stuff that you used to put in the camera instead of a memory
I
card.
don't think any younger listeners are going to be. I think everybody knows what film is.
Well, anyway, so I would sit in a dark room and with no safe light and just splice film together for 4 hours. Or after that, they used to make those team photos where you'd get an individual one that was a little round one,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. Yeah.
underneath it was a bigger team picture,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were usually in like a chocolate brown colored cardboard mount,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they'd have something gold stamped on it with the
Yep.
year and the team name or the
Yep.
school name.
Yep.
So I did that gold stamping too.
Oh, okay.
So there
I
was a
have
pl-
several of those from East.
yeah, there was a guy in Merchantville who made the type. He made the type for my dad, and I'd pick it up there and then drive it down to work. And then they had the stamping machine, the gold foil stamping machine, so I'd run that. So you frequently would have singed fingers from working with the hot metal. In fact, I have a little story. The first year of college, I was coming home, and I was coming home on a Wednesday, and I was supposed to start work the following Monday. So I'd get 2 days off and then the weekend. And I get home Wednesday night, and my dad said, I need you to work tomorrow. Why? I have a big job that has to go out Friday, has to ship Friday at the end of the day. And it was a little league in upstate New York, and they had, I don't know, 50 teams, and all the mounts had to be made. And the kid who did them for my dad had screwed things up royally,
No.
and all had to be remade. So I ended up working, I think it was 14 hours or 12 hours on Thursday, and another 10 or 12 on Friday. I think it was 10 on Friday to get them out to the UPS guy that picked up at the end of the day.
You got it done.
Yeah, got it
Uh,
done. On the 2 days I thought I'd have to relax. So
yeah.
um, But when you work for a family business, you can't call in sick.
No. Yeah,
So
dad knows the
yeah,
ins and outs of that. So what'd you do after graduation from high school?
for the entire 40 some years or
Just
immediately after
immediately
graduation,
after.
uh, I ran out of gas on my way home from dinner.
Ah, okay, that is immediate.
Yeah.
And
So,
who brought you gas and picked you up?
well, we went out to dinner after our graduation, we went out to dinner at Mama Ventura's.
I want to say we were there.
Do you remember Mama Ventura's?
That was where we went for every family birthday or celebration. We
Yeah,
must have been there with
you
you
could have been.
somewhere. We couldn't have been in the
So,
other room.
my favorite thing from Mama Ventura's was shrimp parmesan.
Okay.
Loved it. So we get there, they're out of it.
Ah.
Perfect start to graduation dinner. Anyway, we're driving home from there, and I don't know if you remember where I lived, but I lived in Surrey Place East.
Yeah.
So I was off of Brick Road.
Yeah.
So drive back down 73 from Mama Ventura's, turn onto Brick Road, and literally 5 minutes on Brick Road is where I live, and I run out of gas about a half a mile from my house with Debbie in the car with me. And she looks over at me, what's wrong? I said, I ran out of gas. And she starts laughing and she said, you really didn't have to pull that one. And then my parents pulled up in their car and rolled down the window. Well,
Yeah.
my mom looks over and says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I ran out of gas." My dad starts laughing because it was typical for me to drive with the gas tank on empty. It was just it's a guy thing and all that. So my dad I think came back with a gas can and we finished. But that was immediately after graduation. And then the following day, I went to West's graduation. And then with Debbie's family, we went out to dinner at Chez Robert, the Coliseum.
Oh wow.
And her parents were divorced, so it was both sets of parents, which, is an interesting thing
Dynamic.
to it's an interesting dynamic when you don't have that in your own family.
Right.
So, and that was the first time I had ever seen her parents at the same time in the same place, you
Yeah.
know. So that was, it was a very civil thing, but it was just a strange dynamic. But
Yeah. Where'd you go to school?
so I went to Boston University undergraduate, spent 4 wonderful years in Boston, and I would have stayed there for the next four if I could have. Um, and then went to Fairleigh Dickinson for dental school in North Jersey for the four after that.
So you
But
went directly to dental school?
yeah, yeah, no time off, just kept going to school. I've said this before. If you stay in school long enough, eventually you'll have a doctorate in something.
Or a lot of bills?
Well, or
A
both,
lot of debt, or
or
both?
both.
Yes.
Yeah, I
In our
had both.
cases, yes.
Yes, yes. I actually didn't pay off my student loans until I turned 40, between me and Amy together.
Yeah. Yeah, I was still paying off my student loans till about then as well. Yeah.
Well, we had our kids at 26 and 29. So I took the deferment for the 9 months each time we had a kid born.
Oh wow.
So that kind of extended things. But I was lucky. And you probably, if you took out HEAL loans, you probably were in the same boat because when the HEAL loans, the health education assistance loans were out, those were variable rate and the rates were higher when we took them out.
Yeah.
So as we were paying them back, the price, they actually got a little bit less as time went on because the
Yeah.
interest rate was lower. Memories.
I tell you. So was there a class or a teacher that influenced you well beyond high school?
Beyond high school? It's a good question. There was one teacher in dental school that helped me out, not
Oh no,
clinically.
sorry.
You're talking about in high
In
school.
high school that helped, that was influential, or that
That's a
beyond high
good.
school.
Um, trying to think if there was one. There were there was one I had junior year. Her name was Marjorie Palmer. She was a biology teacher, and I had her for vertebrate anatomy. It was a dissection class, and um, I loved the class. I wasn't great at it, or a great, I was a B student in high school, mostly because of effort rather than intelligence. But I really liked her class a lot. And she's the only teacher I reached out to many, many years later to thank her.
Oh,
I looked her up online in the early days of online and found, Marjorie Palmer's a pretty common name, but I found a Palmer who taught bio at a high school in Texas.
oh wow.
And I sent her an email and I said, "Hey, are you the Marjorie Palmer that taught at Cherry Hill East in the 70s, etc.? If you are, I want to tell you how much I appreciated your class, blah, blah, blah." I said, "And you're not going to remember me because I wasn't your best student or your worst. I was just a kid who really was into that class and spurred me on to go and major in biology in college and blah, And she wrote back to me a couple of days later or a week later. She was like, "Oh my God." She said, "Yes, I am." She said, "You made my day. No, you made my year." That was what
Wow.
I can't believe that you reached out and so forth and so on. But that would be the one teacher that really inspired me, I think, after high school. But then there's also, if you remember Bill Kovnat,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So I had him as an art teacher at Beck, his
Oh,
very
really?
his first year teaching.
Oh,
So
wow.
we were, 13-year-old kids and he was a 22-year-old teacher.
Right.
So of course he was the cool, hip, great guy who was more of a kid than he was an adult.
Yeah.
And then had him again at East for photography or for film,
Hmm.
and just always have had a more of a friendly relationship than the typical student teacher relationship. And we still stayed in touch over the years. I think I got together with him and another teacher from Beck when I was in my early 40s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had lunch at the old Steak and Ale by the Landmark Apartments. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
had lunch with him and stayed in touch ever since. And he was a really great teacher, and I don't know so much inspired or anything like that, but just loved how he interacted with the kids and tried to keep that kind of even keel attitude with every patient I've had and every coworker I've had over the years, which you know I think I've
And
been
and I
able to
think he
keep doing that.
photographed just about all of our weddings.
Yeah, he actually, I remember when he became the photographer, and he was in a partnership with another guy. It was Krasson and Kovnat, the
Yeah,
K and
yeah.
K, right? And because my dad was in that business,
Right.
so we were familiar with. He was familiar with my dad. My dad was familiar with him, and I think he might have even done a couple jobs for Bill at one time. But yeah, he did so many weddings of former students. He did
Yeah.
so many bar and bat mitzvahs of children of
Of
former
former.
students. And then he did weddings of children of former
Wow.
students. So yeah,
Oh, that's something.
he just retired from East after
Oh, wow.
this is his last year teaching.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
So do you still have friends from East you're in touch with?
yeah, there are a few, other than you, of course, but on a regular basis, used to see Rob Thurston, Scott Wishart, and Jeff Lyons every month or two. Every couple of months, we'd get together for a lunch, and Rob and I and Scott would do a lot of bike um, charity rides together. Rob's wife, his late wife, had MS, passed away from MS before she turned 50.
Hmm.
So he had gotten Scott and I into riding the MS ride from the Speedline station in Cherry Hill to Ocean City High School,
Hmm.
which is about 75 or 80 miles. So we started doing that together. We did a few other charity rides, the American Cancer Society ride, and sometimes we just go out and ride in Pennsylvania on the 202 bike path, which was 10 miles in each
Did you
direction.
all live in Pennsylvania? All of you,
No,
or
I was the only one in PA
okay?
at the time. Rob was, when he moved back to the area at one point and was living in um, Cherry Hill. He lived in Uxbridge.
Oh yeah.
And then I think he was back in Illinois, and then he moved back again and was living in Doylestown. So he was
Okay.
close to me in Pennsylvania. Jeff has been in Cherry Hill, I think,
Forever.
forever. Scott was living in Marlton.
Hmm.
So they would drive, they'd ride over. So sometimes we'd meet for lunch in South Jersey, sometimes in PA. Scott eventually moved to Media, Pennsylvania. So we would still meet up either at PJ Wheelahan's or Champs when it was Champs in Marlton, or we'd meet up in Philly because Jeff was the one of us who was working 5 days a week. So we would go to lunch near where he worked in Center City.
Yeah.
So those are the guys I kept in touch with for a lot of years, and a few others through social media. But before the social media, there were only a couple. Um, Bill Tassione, if you remember Bill, was one of them. He and I had been friends since third grade. So we stayed in touch for a long time, and then that kind of fell apart around 2010.
Hmm.
Just a things happen kind of conversation, and then I didn't see him again, and I never will because he passed away a couple
Yeah.
years ago. So that's a kind of a regret that that was never
Hmm.
you know rectified. But
Yeah.
anyway,
So you would you said Debbie was your high school sweetheart?
yeah, that's a good way to
Hmm.
put it. We dated second half of senior year, um, and through the first year of college, even though we were going to different schools. But
But you
there
didn't
was
marry your high school sweetheart.
no, there was some significant writing on the wall where I realized that I wasn't really the one for her, nor her for me.
But you
So
did get married.
I did get married to my college sweetheart, who's sitting in the other room listening to me and laughing.
Hi, Amy.
Kara says, "Hi, Amy." She's waving. Yes.
So you got married and kids, or kids and
Kids.
then married? I mean,
No, no,
this is
no. We did
we're
things in
progressive people.
we did things in the traditional order. Yeah. Amy and I started dating in October of 81, got married in September of 85, and had two sons, one in July of 89 and the other one in June of 92. And our older one, actually, our younger one got married first in August of 18, and our older one got married in November of 18. And grandson number one, who belongs to the older son, arrived in January of 21.
Oh,
And
so
grandson,
Grandpa Eddie,
yes, and grandson number two will arrive in August with the same parents, same child.
same child.
Yeah.
So you'll
So
be up here even more often.
I will be. Yeah. Well, as often as they call us and say, come visit.
Yeah. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
good. So you were saying you losing touch after graduation. You saying Bill, Tassione, anybody else you lost
Well,
touch with that you're
yeah, I mean, one of my other friends since third grade was Paul Kaiser,
oh yeah.
and Paul and I stayed in touch for a number of years. We actually stayed pretty tight through college because he was at Dartmouth
Okay.
and I was in Boston, and Paul's sister Lauren was a year ahead of me at BU.
No.
And his brother Billy was actually also at BU, was a senior when I was a freshman. So Paul would come in occasionally to visit Lauren, and I'd see him when he would come in. Amy and I went up to visit him at Dartmouth. I went up for Winter Carnival one year in the wintertime. But like all things, you get married, you have a family, the dynamic changes, and you drift apart, or you end up you know not having the same relationship.
Yeah.
So, but
Anybody
the
that Facebook brought you together with that maybe you weren't friends in high school?
oh, there's a ton of people on Facebook that I didn't know at all in high school who I've become friends with through Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of friends of friends.
Oh,
There's
okay.
some of the kids who were in the year behind us
Hmm.
that were friends of friends I didn't know at all. There are a few people in our class that I never spoke to
Yeah.
in 4 years of high school that I will, chat with online, or, interact with on social media, that I never knew while we were in school.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool thing about it, is that you know, you've met people virtually
Right.
over that time. In fact, somebody even said to me in an interaction, how come we didn't know each other in high school? How come we
Because there
weren't
was
friends in high
800 of
school?
us.
Right, because there were 800 of us, and you had your little groups, and I
Yeah.
was a lot more introverted in those days too. So I wasn't the one who would be seeking out friendships back then.
Yeah. So standout memories, highs or lows. You mentioned that lacrosse game that you guys that
Yeah, that was,
started. Any other highs or lows that you?
yeah. Well, we had a very short-lived high school hockey league in
Mm,
South Jersey. That was our 10th grade year, and the first part of our 11th grade year, until they closed the Centrum. So I was one of only three sophomores on our high school hockey team, and we went undefeated and won the high school hockey championship, which, was a big deal for me. We beat Bishop Eustace in the two straight in the best of three finals. And there were some eye-opening moments from that for what I considered myself a fairly sheltered kid. So we had 15 seniors on the team,
mm.
and some of them were a little wild.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a guy in between periods. Um, in most youth hockey and high school hockey, they don't resurface the ice in between periods. You just
Mm.
go out and play. Because it was the championship series, after two periods, they resurfaced. So we'd had a
Oh,
clean sheet for the third period. And we were in the dressing room, and one of the guys, who I will not name, obviously, um, was snorting coke.
oh my God.
And I don't know what I really looked like, sitting there as a young 15-year-old kid, but I must have looked like this, because I'd never seen anybody do that. And
Yeah.
I was, and as an athlete, in my mind, I never smoked, I never tried any of that stuff. So I'm like, we still have another period to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were a group of three or four other guys who had gone outside with
Yeah.
a joint.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, it was kind of one of those wow moments for me, because I hadn't been exposed to any of that. So that was a little crazy, but it was a nice moment in high school. Other moments in high school that, at East or
Uh,
beyond.
No, I was just thinking of high school memories that maybe, really stuck out.
That's really the one that sticks out a lot. I have a couple other quick things that just, I remember somebody walking up to me before a biology test, Sam Jaffe.
No, yeah.
And I saw Sam right outside. We had played soccer together freshman year, and um, we're walking into class right before this exam. And Sam walks up and he looks at me very seriously. And he says, Kings play chess on Fridays, generally speaking, and then walks away. And I'm like, what? And then I realized after a moment it was the kingdom, phylum, the whole
Uh,
taxonomy classification. And
okay.
of course, that's on the test. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, Kings, so I had never used mnemonics before that. So that was like the first, that was an aha moment. And of course, in dental school with the cranial nerves, I'm sure you did the same
Yep.
thing,
Yep.
right? So
Yeah.
you start using mnemonics all the time, but that
Yeah.
was the first, so that was an aha moment that I do remember. And there's other weird little moments about high school that stand out in your mind. Things like if you remember Tacey Fox.
Yes.
So Tacey was, a great student. I think she ended up going to Duke or something
Yep.
like that.
I think she
But she
did.
always, but she always wanted everything explained twice.
Okay.
So I remember being in class with her where the teacher would go over and over and over something. And, are there any questions? And she'd raise her hand and she'd say, well, do you mean to say? And then she would repeat verbatim what was just told to her.
Yeah.
And it just made me laugh inside because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what he said. Or. So little things like that, you have those little moments. And um, I have specific moments from lunches where I played sports figure hangman at lunch with Andy Gammy a lot of times, and we'd try to come up with the most obscure athletes' names that we could think of. And Andy's a guy that I'm still in touch with by email or text, and we've been in touch since the 90s.
Oh,
Um, just I think it was Jeff Lyons who started an East email page
okay.
back in the early days of the internet, and that was where Andy and I ended up being on that list. And I think he emailed me, and Andy remembers everything
Yeah.
from going back to forever. And he was reminding me about some of the things I said and did in middle school that I completely forgot about. And I was a pretty immature 12-year-old. Oh, and Amy just said I still am,
Okay.
which doesn't surprise me.
um,
Hmm.
anything you wish classmates knew about you back then, or want to tell them now?
Uh, anything that I wish classmates knew about me back then. Well, if there were, yeah, there's a lot of girls I liked. It'd be nice if they knew that back then and shared the same feeling. Um, but
As you
no,
say
nothing.
this in front of your wife, who's sitting, a
Oh, she
wife of
knows this.
30,
Nah,
whatever, 30,
yeah.
30 plus years.
Yeah, we'll be married 38 in September. We'll be 38 years marriage.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's fun. It's funny as we as a class became active on Facebook. I think it was around 2008 or 9, something like that. All of a sudden, there was a big genesis of our class of 80 having this big group. And for me, it started because I happened to be looking for one person online. I was looking for Jeff Walls. Jeff was a hockey teammate
Okay.
from class of 80. We played club hockey together plus high school. And I was looking to fill out a team for a men's league. And I
Okay.
figured, oh, let me see where Jeff is. I have no idea where he was. Turns out that he was in San Francisco, so there wasn't any chance that we would ever get together. But um, I asked, so I found him on an email list and eventually got in touch with him and found out where he was and all that. And I said, are you in touch with any of the other class of 80 people? And he said, there's a couple. He said, there's a little group that started on Facebook, and I wasn't familiar with it. So at that time, there were about 10 people from the class of 80 on Facebook. So that kind of gave rise to a lot more. Um, but at one point, one of my friends asked me, he said to me, have you had any girls from our class tell you that they liked you back then? And I said, no. Why? He said, because he said there were a number of girls telling him that they had crushes on him back then. And he said to me, I wish I would have known that, because I would have, been more aggressive about asking them out. He said, and he's married at the time, and said, so obviously he wasn't going to do anything about it, but that was his thing. He said to me, would you ever tell anybody that you had a crush on them? And I said, no, there's nothing to be gained by that.
No. In fact, there's some stories that, created some rather unfortunate
Really?
interactions, not necessarily from our class. I'm just
Oh,
saying
right.
stuff that I read where
Yeah.
people connect, confess their,
Well,
hidden
well, let's say you did that today. You told, Jane Doe from 45 years ago, oh, I really had a crush on you. There's two things that
nothing.
can
Yeah.
happen. Either she says, oh, I wish you would have said something because I felt the same way. And then you're kicking yourself for what you didn't do years ago. Or she says, oh, thanks. And then you're like, so really,
Yeah.
what's the point?
There's
Yeah.
no, there's no, yeah, nothing can
No.
truly be gained.
So, yeah. And, I mean, every year in school, from the time I was a little kid, there was always a girl that I liked, and long ago, far away, and not pertinent to my life.
No, no.
No.
So have you ever been back to the building? And when did you go? Why did you go?
So
Did you feel?
I was back at the building. Um, my younger brother graduated in 82, and I think I probably picked him up at school once or twice when I was home from college. And my younger sister graduated in 88.
Oh
So
well.
I know I was back there at one point. How did I feel? The hallways seem small compared to, because the lecture halls at Boston University are large, and those buildings are really big 1800s buildings. So walking through the halls at East were, it seemed pretty small.
Yeah.
But and just going back there and seeing tennis courts that weren't there when we were there. They built tennis courts that were,
Damn, we had to go over to what is it? Back
yeah,
every
probably.
afternoon.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
do you remember where the bus lane was?
Yeah.
That first turn in by
Yeah.
the football field. So they built tennis courts there.
Huh.
And occasionally I'd go and play tennis in the summer when I was home, and we'd play there. We'd play over at there was that elementary school across from Holly Ravine on the
Yeah.
evening, and I'd play tennis there. And I can't remember the name of the school, but I used to get together with a group in the summers, that we got together fairly frequently during the college years. Two of those years I didn't come home. I stayed in Massachusetts at Amy's parents' house. But the years that I did come home, I would hang out with that group of friends and, play tennis or go for ice cream or whatever we did. We played Uno a lot. There was a group that I would see when I came home all the time, at Thanksgiving and things like that. And that was the same group that used to get together and just hang out in the summers from time to time during those 4 years.
Yeah.
And then after college ended, that kind of disappeared. And I also got married and, moved away, and your
Life
life
changes.
changes. Yeah.
Yeah. So bring yourself back to 1980. You've just graduated. You're looking down the road 40 years.
Hmm.
Is this where you are now or where you thought you'd be?
Um, Probably not. No, I had no idea I'd end up moving to North Carolina. I had no idea I would be married this long. I mean, when I graduated high school, I had been dating Debbie since February, and I couldn't conceive of going out with somebody else at that point. I couldn't conceive of being my age. I couldn't look forward that far. I never looked that far ahead. I remember thinking, wow, I'm going to be 38 in the year 2000.
Yes, yes.
Do you remember that? And that
Yes,
was like
yes.
that
Yes.
was the most futuristic thing I could think of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to be 23 years beyond that was inconceivable at the time to me.
Yeah.
And I want to know, where are the flying cars, really? I
I
mean,
know.
I want the flying car, but no, so really I just had no conception of anything that far in the future. And
But here
it's
you
just,
are.
but here I am. Here I am. Yeah.
So if you were to give a piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, I know that's kind of a cliche question, but I'm just curious. Could you think, or did you give that advice to either of your kids, or?
Yeah, there was advice I gave my kids that um, I would have given myself if I knew what I knew then. If I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, absolutely. I told both of my kids, listen, get a job where you can make money, you can earn a living and get paid when you're not there,
Hmm,
or you can work, because in our jobs, yours as well as mine,
yeah,
it's all hands on.
yeah,
And if you're not working, you're not bringing in income or anything like that. So, and it's also tough dealing with patients every day because you're not just dealing with whatever thing they're seeing you for, you're dealing with everything happening in their life.
yeah,
You become an amateur psychiatrist at the same time you become whatever you're doing.
right.
So I kind of steered them clear of that. And one became a banker and one became an actuary. So, but if I could tell my 18-year-old self, yeah, uh, I would have said go to a state school. Don't take out big loans for college. Although I wouldn't have followed that advice because I wouldn't have met Amy that way. But uh, education I could have gotten my education at a lot lower cost,
Yeah,
and not I would have been able to start putting money away into retirement long before I actually could. So those are things I told my kids, get your retirement fund started right away, and they have. So
yeah.
that's a big advantage. And probably would have told myself to look into Microsoft and Apple and you know buy some
Hi,
stock, kid, buy
hi,
some stock. Yeah.
hindsight's 2020. Yeah,
Yeah, of course, especially in the stock market.
yeah. Like
um
if you had gone and invested in Blockbuster, that would have been a good one.
for a while,
For a
for a
while.
while. There's a great novel that was written in the 80s. I think it was the 80s, called Replay. And it's one of my all-time favorite books because I read it in my 20s, and the main character was 43 years old and has a heart attack.
Mm,
And when he wakes up, he thinks he's in a hospital room at night, but he doesn't hear any machines beeping. He doesn't hear anything associated with a hospital or any of the hospital smells or anything. And the room is vaguely familiar in the dark to him. And he realizes in the next page or two of the book that he's in his freshman college dorm room. And he gets up and looks in the mirror and sees his 18-year-old self looking back at him. But he's retained the memories of the 25 years that he had lived till be 43. And in essence, he gets to live those years over again.
yeah.
So what does he do? Well, he knows who's going to win all these sports events that he can bet on. He knows what stocks to buy. And this was the issue with he and his wife. They never had enough money. That's what they always argued over. So he's got the opportunity for wealth, and he knows when and where he meets his wife so he can be there. And of course, it becomes a contrived meeting rather than the organic, natural meeting it was, and they end up not together. And
Yeah.
his life turns out differently than he thinks it will. And then at 43, he dies again and lives it over. And
Uh,
it's like a Groundhog Day
yeah.
without the comedy. It's a
Yeah.
serious look at, if you had the chance to live your life over again, would you, or would you be better off just having lived what you did live?
Hmm.
So it was a really cool book. And I read it again at 43
Ah.
when I could appreciate it a lot more than when I was 26 or
And what was it called
27.
again?
Replay.
Replay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things I wish I would have known back then, but I don't know if I'd make a whole lot of different choices. I originally wanted to be a teacher
Ah,
and got talked out of it by my mom,
a
who had
teacher.
been, she had been a teacher in the Philly schools in the 50s. She taught high school English at a time when teachers were not well paid at all.
I don't believe they're well paid now.
Well, in the district where my kids went, where we raised them in Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
there were teachers who were making six figures.
Okay.
So they were a lot better paid in that district.
Yeah.
And
Take a look
but
around North Carolina. Not so much.
oh, I know that, but I'm talking about, so we're in our general, region, Cherry Hill teachers were well paid.
Mhm.
Um, so I could have had a different career, summers off, not working nights, different things that, or at least not working nights at school.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I wish I would have done that because I think I would have enjoyed it more. But at the same time, it's always looks better from the other side of the fence, and you can't know for sure. So you just live through your decisions and, move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So our Fast and Furious finish.
Yes.
All right. So did you have a favorite TV show or a favorite movie or a favorite book from your high school days?
Favorite TV show from high school days?
Or movie or
Uh,
book or something that,
well, favorite movie was Slapshot.
of course.
It was going to be a hockey one, but
Yep.
yeah, Slapshot was favorite movie. Favorite TV show? I have to remember what was on when we were in high school compared to,
MASH.
yeah, I mean, I liked MASH, but I think by the time we were in high school, MASH had become less of a comedy and more of a drama. And I preferred the first three seasons with Henry and Trapper
Yeah.
before it became kind of a preachy,
Mm,
serious. I think they called it a dramedy at that
dramedy.
point. Barney Miller was always a favorite.
That was a good one.
WKRP, but I don't remember whether that was high school or college.
Ah,
WKRP in
yeah, that was
Cincinnati.
a great one too.
Yeah. Um, I know Cheers wasn't until college because
Right.
that was in 82. But late 70s, there were a lot of funny shows on the late 70s. Soap, I thought, was hysterical.
Yes.
And there were dramas that I liked, Staying Elsewhere, I think
Yep.
was from those days. Or if it wasn't high school, then maybe Hill Street Blues. But I
Hmm.
can't,
Yeah.
I just don't remember which years they were on. And going back further than that, things like Mission Impossible and Manic
Oh
Street were
yeah.
young. That was before high school,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. So um, just hard to remember. Whatchamacallit, One Day at a Time with Valerie
Oh yeah.
Bertinelli, and that was on in high school. And
Got remade.
I heard that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have
It was
never
good.
saw it, but
Yeah.
was it the
It's good.
same cat?
No, it was Rita Moreno was in it. It was about Latinx family,
Oh,
and
okay.
it was very cute.
Yeah,
Yeah, well done.
yeah.
So, how about a favorite musical group or a favorite artist or favorite genre music back then?
So my favorite music back then is still my favorite music today, and that's the British Invasion from the
Yeah,
60s. It's still the stuff I love listening to. The Beatles, have always been my favorite group. When you asked before about looking into the future and all that, in 1980 in June, I would have been shocked, like everybody else, to know, oh, in 6 months, John Lennon's going to be murdered.
right.
That was a seminal point in our lives where
Mm,
everybody kind of remembers where
where
they
were
were when they
you?
heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we always harbored the hope that the Beatles would get back together. So that put an end to that. But that was one of those things. I'll tell you, you know what I just thought of? What was the show that everybody watched when we were in high school? Saturday Night Live.
Oh wow, yeah.
I mean, that was a big deal
That
back
was
then.
appointment
And
watching. Yeah,
yes, exactly. And I remember being with a group of friends in high school watching that, senior year or junior year, getting together to
to
watch
watch
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was cutting edge back then.
Wait a minute, I just lost you for some reason.
Well,
Oh wait,
I still see you.
there we go. I don't know what
Okay.
happened.
No. So
Technology.
yeah.
Um. So, all right. So, where was your favorite place to eat or hang out in high school, and when was the last time you were there, if it still exists?
Oh my God, where my favorite place to eat when I was in high school. You know what I really liked a lot, which has been long gone, it was H.A. Winston's.
Oh yeah, I remember the Winstons.
They had really good burgers, they had really good French onion soup.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Um,
Did you hang out there or
didn't hang out there. We
yeah?
went the family went there sometimes. I remember going to dinner there once, just me and my mom. And first date with Debbie was at Winston's. I remember that, which I thought went well, and then I never heard from her. I could give you details of that's humorous,
Yeah.
but Winston's was a favorite.
You were saying that you guys would hang out outside the 7-Eleven after your
Yeah,
games.
yeah. Um, Another favorite moment from high school was you remember the Pathmark at Ellisburg Circle?
Yeah.
So they had a parking garage.
Oh, really?
It's yeah, in senior year, Friday nights, a large group of us would get together to play street hockey under the parking garage. They'd make an announcement in the building, in the market, for people to move their cars to one side. Because the Pathmark people liked when we played there, because the nights we didn't play there, that's where kids would go to drink, and they'd
Uh,
leave broken bottles, because
okay.
remember, it was 18 back then,
Yeah.
and kids would break bottles and leave them in the parking lot. And so
If you
when we
guys were
were
there, that wasn't happening.
kids didn't come to drink, and we would, my brother and I would play, my younger brother and I, and Bill Tassione and his older brother and a bunch of friends from our neighborhood, and we'd usually stop at the other 7-Eleven, the one in Marlton, next to McDonald's on
Hmm.
70. And that was another place that we hung out a lot. Was I remember going to that McDonald's a lot, and a lot of kids worked at that McDonald's.
Oh.
In fact, I remember cutting classes and going to lunch at McDonald's in Marlton. Um, well, you
Yeah.
do what you do when you're a kid. But I'm trying to think of where else we ate a lot. Nick's for steak
Oh,
sandwiches.
okay.
And Nick was a Ventura. That was the son from
Oh, okay. I didn't
Mama
realize that.
Ventura's, the library, which is still there.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
All
trying to
right.
think.
So, next question.
Yes.
Did you like your high school yearbook picture?
Picture? Yeah, I think that's what I looked like. And um, yeah, I had no problems with that. I was never the most photogenic person in the world. Still not.
I
I
see you
never
didn't put a quote. No quote for
did
you.
not put a quote, because I figured I don't know what this quote's going to look like in 20 years or
You don't know
40
how it's going to
years.
age.
Don't know how it's going to age. And there wasn't really a best, like favorite moment, favorite teacher. I didn't really have any of that. And um, no, I just thought it was good to be under the radar, and there wouldn't be anything that I would regret
There you
later.
go.
Uh,
All right.
yeah,
So, one of the last questions here. So, what was the name of our yearbook?
Eidolon or Eidolon, or however you
Eidolon.
pronounce it. Yeah.
Okay. And bonus question is, what's an Eidolon?
Oh, no clue. What is it?
From the Greek, it's an apparition or phantom, an ideal or idealized figure. And so, my hope, at the suggestion of Jeff Lyons, is to interview Debbie Smead, who I guess was our yearbook editor.
Mm-hmm.
But as I recall, I think Eidolon has been the name of the yearbook forever, because I think my
Yes,
brother's yearbook, so it's always been Eidolon. But I'm just sort of curious. And the last question, which you can talk about not aging well, is: do you realize at the bottom of every page there was a picture of a gun?
I do. And we touched on this before, but I have no idea why we had a Western theme to the
Yeah.
yearbook.
So again, another question for Debbie Smead, if I can get her
Yeah.
on.
And I was an art contributor. My yearbook actually has art contributor stamped under my name.
Oh,
Um, I don't remember which art I
art you
contributed
contributed
or anything
the
like
picture of the
that.
gun? Maybe? Oh.
No, it was not the picture of the gun. I never went to any of the meetings. I contributed by proxy, I think, by from Frank Vittori or Gary
Uh,
Snegeroff. But yeah. One piece of advice: Debbie Smead doesn't go by Debbie anymore. She's
oh,
Deborah.
Deborah.
Yes,
Okay.
she's
Well, do you?
Deborah.
I know that you're listed as Edward in places, but
No,
Eddie just kind of,
I've always been Eddie.
yeah.
The only the only version of that I don't like is Ed, but I've been
Oh,
Eddie forever. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, she's Deborah.
All
I
right.
she's one I keep in touch with. So
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see if we can get her on. And so, Eddie. I just want to thank you for joining me on It's Been How Long? And
Long,
what?
but it really hasn't been that long for us.
Oh, for us, yes.
Yes.
Yes. But I'm trying to say, so when did we really connect?
So
I think
we
it was Facebook.
so we connected on Facebook, and then you were gracious enough to have us to your home when we were
Yes,
coming
that's right.
down with my younger son
To interview.
to visit UNC Chapel Hill and
That's right.
Duke.
Yep.
So that's when we flew down and we had dinner with you at
Yep.
your family. And he graduated high school in 2010, so that probably was 2008 that we
Right.
came
Okay.
down. 2008 or early 2000, or sometime in 2009.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really our reconnection.
Connection. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
our connection was more outside of East. It was more Temple
Oh,
Emmanuel
yeah. It
than it
was.
was East, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I don't
It
think we
was.
had any classes together at
I don't
East.
recall that either. Yeah.
You were in the smart classes and I wasn't.
I'm not so sure about that. But
I'm pretty sure.
yeah. So thank you for joining me, and
Oh, it's my pleasure.
thanks for joining me on It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and the early 80s. A shout out to my cousin Brad Corbett, whose podcast We Weren't Friends in High School inspired me to do this podcast, and whose advice and encouragement have been so helpful. Thanks also to my husband, Randy Cockdale, who read all the fine print on the podcast hosting website so I wouldn't have to. And thanks to Jeff Lyons, content consultant and guinea pig, and to Deborah Smead, also content consultant. And thank you to all our classmates who are listening in. See you next week.